Ooh, the man, the myth, the legend.
I should be saying that about you. How's everything going, man?
Not too bad, man. Hey, I dig the backdrop. Very nice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, put a bunch of random stuff back there. It's
Mhm.
been built up over the last few years, but
Mhm.
yeah, man, like yours as well. Books in the back, you can never go wrong.
Hey, that's right. That's right.
But yeah, man, thanks for jumping on with me. I think it'd be helpful for the community to see different perspectives and hear some questions answered that they have. That's why I wanted to bring you on because you were one of the first people that came to mind.
Awesome. Well, it's great to be here and I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
One of the main things I wanted to just ask you is, obviously just hear more about your story and where you came from and kind of how you got into this industry, man.
I got in by accident. I actually was working in the body shop world for a while, and somebody uh, working at the mechanic next door kept asking me to come to this meeting about this business opportunity. And after a while, I decided to go. It was turned out to be network marketing. It was an MLM live event at a hotel, and that was the first time I was ever introduced to sort of working for yourself or having a side hustle. And I was immediately hooked. And of course, they build those presentations to really tug at your heartstrings. But I signed up on the spot and started side hustling with MLM. And fast forward about 2 years, wasn't having a whole lot of success with that, and eventually thought that the way to have success is with it was to quit my job. So I quit my job and then went into network marketing full time. Give that about another 8 months. I'm still not not doing well at all. And I came across an ad on Facebook of a gentleman who is to this day dear friend, um, who was a has who had been a MLMer for a long time and eventually got tired of the poaching friends and family and reaching out to everybody in your personal network and trying to sell them something, like most of us do. It's really kind of the biggest downside of network marketing. And so he had figured out how to pitch the network marketing opportunity to a cold audience using digital marketing. And so I bought his program and learned how to run ads and started to build the business that way. Well, I met a sales rep who was selling lead gen to attorneys, and we became friends. And I fizzled out of MLM completely. And that sales rep introduced me to a recruiter. A lot of people may know him, but Moose Reed is his name. This is a little over 3 years ago, and he hooked me up with a couple of sales rep offers on different campaigns. And then after a couple of those, he asked me to come work with him, and that was January of 2021. And then fast forward again, I was with Moose and coaching sales, Mike Mark for a while. Then I was with the Welch brothers for a while. And then I was with another recruiting agency that David Melman and Nick Elliott run. And then March of 2023 is when I started branching out and doing my own recruiting. And then, here we are to today.
Yeah, there's a lot of transferable skills from network marketing to just being a full on recruiter. A lot of that's the same stuff. You're just not having to reach out to friends and family.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
um, what how do you like stick with sales recruiting in particular?
When you say stick with it, like, what do you
Yeah,
mean?
I mean, you could have branched off into all types of different recruiting. People are looking for copywriters, people are looking
Mm.
for marketers in all types of industries. Why sales? Is it kind of just, hey, you got in it and just never left, or did you consciously make a decision to, go all in on sales recruiting when you launched your own thing?
Well, when I started with the first agency, that's what I was recruiting for was sales roles, and that's what I was doing with the Welch brothers as well, and then with the third agency I was with. So it's one of those things that was what I was hired to do, and I just kind of stuck with it because I
You know
know
how to
that
do it.
space, and really had no reason to look elsewhere because it's such a popular role that needs to be filled. It's also a very high turnover role for a lot of factors that maybe we'll touch on later. But so there's always a constant need for um, salespeople. So
hmm hmm Well, when it comes to just like this industry as a whole, I mean, it's been growing fast lately.
mhm.
A lot of people are getting into, especially just like the coaching space. A lot of people are, wanting to bring on closer setters. That role has just really opened up over the last like 2 to 3 years. It was kind of like a unspoken thing. People didn't call it closer. You were just kind of on the
Hmm.
team as like an advisor or something. But
Hmm.
now it's like its whole own thing. Where do you see it going over, in 3 more years, 5 more years? What do you think that looks like?
I don't think it is going to stop anytime soon. When I zoom out and I look at how the traditional schooling system is set up, it's way behind. And that it worked in during, it was really born out of the industrial revolution to pump out factory workers that really just knew how to do one very simple thing with assembly lines and all that jazz. But now if you look at how long it takes to get information written down, put into curriculum, into the schools and in front of students, by that point it's out of date. And we're to the point now, we used to replace knowledge every 1,000 years. Now we're to the point we're replacing it every couple of days. So traditional universities and colleges, they just can't keep up with innovation and all the tech boom, not to mention AI, just all blockchain, all the things that we're compounding on ourselves. We're at the base of that hockey stick curve, I think, in a lot of ways. So I think that the way that we learn is going to continue to pivot more towards the model that many of the companies within this coaching space or e-learning space, info product space have adopted. And rather than spending $120,000, which is the average amount of student debt that kids have when they get out of college, you can spend a tenth of that and learn the one skill that you're actually interested in, instead of this messy conglomeration of um, you know, basic fundamental things that you may or may not need when you get out to the real world. I have a degree, and I'm thankful that I got it because it was what allowed me to get my first job. But I use approximately 0% of what I learned in college. So college did not set me up for anything entrepreneurial whatsoever, not a single iota. So, in that sense, I think it's going to continue to grow as more and more people are realizing that the traditional schooling route is really doing them a disservice and is a complete and utter failure in many, many respects. Now, there's certain industries that I think it can still work for, but generally speaking, I think more people are going to continue to turn to the online space, because it is at the tip of the spear with being able to innovate quickly, adapt to the changes, pay attention to the trends that are happening with different niches and markets and industries. So, in a very broad sense, I think that's where the space is going. It's going to be a better version, a bigger version, a more institutionalized, organized version of what it is now, as companies that do well continue to take more and more market share, and those that decided they wanted to take the less uh, good route uh, end up falling to the wayside over time. So I'm optimistic.
And I think that question kind of stems from the if you just look at, and I guess you can sum this up to all business. I guess this industry is just a lot easier to kind of get into, but I guess where I'm going with the question is you see a lot of businesses in this industry fizzle out over a
Hmm.
year, 2 years. You just don't see them last super, super
Right.
long. And I guess that can kind of, for some people, be an indication of, oh, maybe it's just kind of like a short term thing. Or where do you think that's coming from? Why do you think businesses don't last as long in this industry?
Well, when you look at businesses in general, they have a high failure rate as it is. Depending on who you ask, I'd say it's anywhere from 65 to 80-ish% of businesses don't make it past the first 5 years. And a majority of the space is made up of a lot of startups. Even if you look at the guys that have been in the space for, well, I mean, side note, Facebook hasn't even been around for that long. If you think about it, it's
Yeah.
2 decades. So the space is relatively young in and of itself. But if you look at OGs, if you will, they're not still singing the same song. They have absolutely changed what they're offering to the marketplace at least once. And many times they've changed it a lot, and that's because they've had to. So You could even say that they're new businesses, just same people behind it. So I think in some ways, paying attention to trends is something that a lot of people don't do. They're not looking at where the puck is going to be. They're reactionary and they're looking at um, what is working, but they're looking at what's working based on data that is not relevant, is not current. Because those companies, they've spent the last 3, 4, 5 years building that. And so now you're looking at trying to catch up to them. Well, you still have that learning curve. You still have that growth period that you have to get through. So by the time you're to where they are, they're going to be on to the next thing, and they're going to continue to smoke you. So I think there is an element of first mover advantage in the startup world, but I don't think that tells the whole story. I do think there's another element to um, putting people over profits. I think too many people are getting sucked into shiny object syndrome and are focusing way too hard on the money. And I think there's this big narrative around building a business and being an entrepreneur, or being a 1099 contractor, that type of thing. That it's easy, and it's nothing but it's not easy at all. In no way, shape, or form is it easy. It's incredibly difficult. Less, and I looked at this yesterday. The roughly 10 to 15% of at least the US is entrepreneurial. The rest are employees. So 10%, 1 out of 10 people is an entrepreneur. So, and I'm not saying that's either good or bad. I'm just saying very small percentage of the people, at least in the US, are entrepreneurial. And so, coupled with the fact that I don't think people come in with the right expectations, I don't think people have there's a lot of reasons. I don't think if people have a big enough why, they fizzle out because there's not, like, when you're chasing money, you're only going to get so far. Like, I got into this space because I wanted to be home with my kids, which I didn't even have yet. Now I have two of them now, and they've never been around a dad that has had to go to the office. Now, was going to the office bad? No. Do I miss the office in some ways? Yes. I miss being around other people. Gets kind of lonely when you're working for yourself, by yourself, in your office, at the house. But each why has their own consequences, and some of them is just stuff you have to deal with because you chose. This is what I chose. So there's multiple reasons that I think that people just don't, businesses fizzle out, but it's very hard. And there's a big learning curve. And if you're not really dialed in with why you're doing what you're doing, and you're just borrowing somebody else's belief, or you're just trying to do something because you think it's cool or hip, or because you want the outcome, or you're trying to get out. Like, a lot of people come into the space because, not because they want to be in sales, not because they like the high ticket space, they just hate their job, and that's not a good reason in my
Yeah.
opinion, to do something. So I think at the end of the day, it's really having a strong, healthy motive behind what you're doing. Because and I've had this a hundred times. I'm sure you have as well. You have those days where everything sucks, and you sit there and you're like, should I be doing this right now? Did I make the right call? Should I go back to corporate? Do I even belong here? All those questions you start asking yourself, and it's like, you know, I'm a man of faith, so a lot of prayer goes into those days. But at the end of the day, what's going to sustain you through those difficult times? It's easy to be happy and joyful when everything's going well, but what about when it's not? Are you just going to give up and quit, or are you going to continue on because you know why you're there?
100%. You can also see there's like a clear lack of focus on just making a really good product for some. For some,
Hmm.
when they get
For
started,
sure.
it's like they're chasing that. I do X a month instead of I'm just going to make the best thing and dedicate the next few years to it. So, yeah,
Yeah,
100%. I don't know how some people get through it without God. I couldn't. I know
dude,
I couldn't.
tell me about it.
Because
Tell
those
me about
days
it.
when they come, I just know I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna leave it to you.
Hmm.
And that's the only reason I'm still here. So I don't know how some
Hmm.
people do it. They've got stronger minds than me, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Um
preach.
some people, and I had like a back and forth with a buddy of mine the other day. Some people are saying AI is going to take over at least the setter position. Some people think the closer position as well. What are your thoughts around that?
I've heard this before, and ultimately, I think it's way too early to tell. My opinion is that we will have a pendulum swing. It will as everybody gets really hyped over being able to automate all of their sales conversations, uh, they will go too far, and the market will catch up and be like, I'm not talking to a robot anymore. I want to talk to an actual person. And then it'll find some happy medium where it's there's somehow some good synergy between um and I think ultimately more transparency, because right now it's all about trying to fool the prospect into thinking that they're talking to a real human when they're actually not. So I think once the marketplace at large catches up to this idea that they just got closed by a robot, it'll be like, no, 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 like there's going to be some sort of valid verification process in place where it's going to be like, hey, I'm a real person, and here's how you can tell. And I think there's ultimately always going to be a market for, and we have like handmade versus machine made. It's going to
Mhm.
be offers that are, and then this is maybe farther down the road, but offers that are, made by or run by AI, and offers that are done by humans. So I think it's people are getting a little too uh ov- apprehensive about it. I don't think it's going to be as bad as I think it's going to be a slower transition than a lot of people think, but ultimately I don't think it's going to be as bad as everybody thinks it is. Yes, it's going to take some jobs, but it's going to bring in more jobs, just like the introduction of any other technological advancement that we've had. So more opportunity. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be that bad, because I think people were wired to want to be to want to connect with other human beings, and no matter how good your AI is, it's never going to have a soul. And that's one thing that
Yeah.
you can't replicate, you can't duplicate. And I actually don't think it's going to be able to duplicate intuition very well. And maybe that's short sighted, but I find it hard to believe that you're going to be able to give a gut to a robot, which is largely how I make a lot of my decisions in business. Is hippy dippy as that might sound, like just going off of you know your your intuition, I think is largely undervalued. I don't think it's something that AI is going to be able to replicate very well, if at all.
Yeah, I think there's a big majority of offers where there's just such an emotional connection for someone to make that decision to move forward with that
Hmm.
company that even if the AI was perfectly trained to say all the same stuff, had the perfect tonality and all that, just you on the other end of the phone knowing that it's a robot and that they're programmed to, I don't know, tug at the heartstrings in a way, and
Yeah,
there's no air of genuinity from it, even though it may sound perfect. I just don't see it being able to be enough to take over everything and be like, well, closers are done, position's gone.
agreed.
Yeah. Um, One thing I want to ask, when it comes to just bringing your faith into business or bringing God into your business, how do you, because, and one thing I have my strong opinions on it, but there's a lot of people who have the idea that you can't be a Christian and an entrepreneur, you can't be a Christian and be successful, you can't be a Christian and quote unquote, uh, make money. How do you bring God into your business, and what are your thoughts on those kind of things?
Well, for me, my my faith is it's the foundation of everything that I do. So, or at least it needs to be. And then, despite the times that I veer from that, that's those are the exceptions, obviously. But when I sin, is what I mean. But um, with it being the core of my being, it permeates through everything that I think, say, and do. And the problem that I have run into multiple times is looking at, okay, well, I know what needs to be done to glorify the Lord. Okay, yes, I mess up sometimes, but ultimately I know how to bring him glory and honor and obey. And uh, the issue that I run into is, well, not everybody's like that. And I regularly wrestle with, okay, doing business with people that I don't agree with, or that clearly are have no interest in doing the right thing, much less doing it for God's glory. And the verse that I continue to always come back to is to be in the world, not of the world. And when Paul talks about uh, not tethering yourself to the world, he's not saying don't interact with the world, because if you didn't interact with the world, you'd have to leave. So there's some line there where we are supposed to be interacting with the lost, to be able to preach the gospel. And I think there's also this misnomer that if you're a Christian, then and you want to preach the gospel or you want to help bring people to a saving faith, that you've you've got to be in official ministry, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Like, we are all part of the body, and the hand is not the same as the foot, and the head's not the same as the shoulder. So we all have a place, and I think where God has us is where we need to double down and do whatever we can to bring him the praise and edification that he deserves. um, so it's hard, and plus, in like in this space where everything's all about manifestation and this hippy dippy, like, the answers are inside of you and you just have to dig through and figure it out, and like self development, like it's all sinful. At the end of the day, it's not the answer, it's man's answer to try to fill the void that only Jesus can fill, only the Holy Spirit can fill. Um and uh it's difficult to be a Christian, to be sinful, and also interact with a world that doesn't want to bring God glory. But I think there's absolutely a way, and it's 100% lots of prayer, and having people in your life that you can um, that can keep you in check. Iron sharpens iron, keep you hold you accountable, and that type of thing. So, um, again, long answer, but it's definitely not easy.
100%. Something to wrestle with daily. So I guess the number one takeaway there is just staying in communication, lots of prayer, and allowing him to just guide, because it's a day by
Amen.
day thing. It's a day
That's
by day
right.
thing. No, amen to that. Now I want to get into some of the things that a lot of people in the community wanted to know. Some of the more recruitment side of what you do. One thing that the community really want to know was, what are some of like the main things you look for or businesses looking for when selecting talent?
A lot of uh, people would like to say that they're objective when they're trying to select talent, but they're not. Most people are looking for themselves in some way, shape, or form. And I don't think so. In this space, there's some nuance to this space that doesn't apply to like corporate at large. And that being that these are all very lean teams, and you do not generally have people within an organization that are professional HR managers, hiring managers, professional recruiters. They are not experienced at hiring in any way, shape, or form. It's just one of the 15 hats that they wear running an online business. So with that, they generally don't. Many of them don't know what they're looking for, and um, or wouldn't be able, they can't communicate what they're looking for. They would know it when they saw it or when they're interacting with said person, but they generally have a hard time communicating what they want. So they all default to the same thing. I want someone who shows up on time, and I want someone who's a good culture fit, and I want this and what's that. And they don't even have a mission statement. They don't even know what their culture is. Like, it's just kind of a throw mud at the wall to see what sticks type of thing. So understand that caveat. Understand that there is, like, if you are approaching a business, maybe outside a recruiter, then go into it knowing that it's very likely that they may need to be educated on what to look for. So understanding what value you bring, and then understand that they may not know how to communicate what they're actually looking for, what they want. And what I like to the system that I like to use is Patrick Lencioni's ideal team players: hungry, humble, and smart. The trifecta. You have three core character traits, pretty much cover everything that you need. Um, so if you can come at it from more of a character and value perspective, rather than, and soft skills is what we're talking about, not hard skills, because a lot of the guys that are hiring, they're like, okay, look, here's what I want. I want somebody who's sold XYZ, who's got 5 years experience in sales, and is this XYZ demographic. Easy boxes to check. It's like, okay, that's no problem. There's a lot of people that fit that description. You could send them 100 people, and none of them are going to be people that they want to talk with, because what they're actually going to make the decision based off is whether it's something that's far more subjective. Like I said, is whether or not they like the person. And that can be hard to quantify. Like, why do I like this? I don't know. I just do. It's like, why do you like cheese on your, pepperoni on your pizza versus sausage? I don't know. I just do. So, and this the same thing here. Like, for example, a lot of businesses, nearly all of them, before they will agree to a one-on-one interview with a candidate, is they'll watch intro videos. Pretty common. And that right there is, if I had to pick one thing, the number one determiner of whether or not you're getting a call with that business owner. Um, so with what they're looking for, again, they don't often know. And that right there, I know it's not really answering a question, but that right there, I think is good for people to understand that you have to explain things to somebody in a way that you wouldn't think that you'd have to. Like, you really have to get down and just completely open up the box and bridge the gap, because what they're looking for is hard skills. What they should be looking for is soft skills. So you got to educate them on, hey, look, I may not have the exact uh, experience that you're looking for, but here's not what I've done, but here's how I do the things that I do. Because a lot of people can do the thing, but very few people can do the thing with excellence and with a high level of detail and care. And that, in my opinion, is what more business owners should be looking for. There's a couple other things, but that right there is, I think, is a good place to start for some for a lot of people that are approaching businesses looking to hire.
Your business. I'm assuming you get a bunch of people applying in your pipeline, and then you select maybe two or three or five to send off to the business owner, and from there they interview and see which ones they want to bring on. Is that kind of how it goes?
Mhm.
So what gets someone past, like, what and obviously this is going to vary from business to business, whether you feel like, okay, you'd be a good fit for this business. So I understand there's not like a hard set of you'll pass for every single person on the roster here, but what are some of the main things you look for when you're just scrolling through that pipeline, because I know probably hundreds come through there? What stands
Yeah.
out to you?
It's, well, maybe you wouldn't. It's often the small things. So my opinion of you as a candidate starts the second that I'm introduced to you in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's the first time is through a DM, through a referral, or you happen to get to my link and your application comes through. Like, that first impression, people, it's need to own that thing. It is real. 100% will make or break you. Is the first time somebody is introduced to you, what are they seeing? Because that is the impression that is going to stick in their mind beyond anything else that you can do after that. So, um, what I'm looking for is, did somebody try again? And you're going to hear that some of this stuff is really basic, but that's because the barrier is so low, so low. uh and it is unbelievable how many people don't take the time to make sure that first impression is legendary. They just like, just give me to the job, give me to the job, give me to the job. And I get people, like, when you're looking for a job, you're probably hurting for money, or you're probably wanting to make some money. So there's some huge incentive there. But people also got to realize that when you're approaching somebody and you want something from them, you can't be looking at it from what you get out of that interaction. You have to ask yourself, okay, what does this person get from this interaction? I'm going to talk about it from my perspective, but this applies to any sales conversation. Yes, I need candidates to get paid, but the candidates have to recognize that they are the product. They are the deliverable. As weird as that might sound, I get paid when they get hired. So business owner is paying me for access to a network, for systems that I set up that allow me to bring in people to the pipeline, and that's how I make my money. So knowing that ahead of time, just a simple reframe, and it's like, hey, and I forget the guy's name. He was a popular MLMer back in the '90s, but he would always say, "Help enough people get what they want, and you'll get what you want." So knowing that we have the same goal, you can just approach it with a little bit of a different angle of, hey, instead of, hey, I'm looking for a job, or I need some employment, or I need this, I need that, you just come across needy and you come across desperate. And it's just kind of like, not really interested. But I get that a lot. So I often just let it slide because it's super common. But the guys that recognize that I have umpteen people asking for jobs, that the supply demand ratio is not stacked in their favor, that I literally almost can have my pick of the litter when it comes to who I want to introduce. They recognize those things. They tell me those things, and they ask how they can help make my job easier. Those guys, like, you're at the top of the list. Like, whatever I can do, I got you, because I can tell they're paying attention to other people's needs, and it's a huge signal of self awareness and your humility, and recognizing that it ain't all about you. So I think recognizing those couple things when you're approaching a recruiter can be really helpful. And I think some of them apply to, approaching anybody, because you wouldn't hop on a phone call with a prospect and be like, "Hey, I want to make some money off this call, so I need you to close." You're gonna, yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
laugh, but this is what people do. Like, to recruiters, like, "I need a job from you." Okay, great, fine. What are you gonna do for me? So I think it's kind of the same thing. Like, you got to go out on that sales call, and you got to do what's best for that prospect, and you will get
Mhm.
what you are duly owed in return. They're either going to love you because you didn't close them and it wasn't a good fit, or they're going to love you because you brought them in because it was a great fit. Either way, you win. So it's the same thing with me. It's just looking at it from a little bit of a different angle. And I know, and the reason that I care about that is because I know if you're treating me like that, you're more likely going to treat the business owner like that, and you're more likely going to treat their prospects like that. And as a recruiter, you have to remember that there's often replacement windows. So if you don't work out, I got to replace you.
Mhm.
So I'm looking for any reason to sniff out if you're a flight risk, or if you're selfish and you're not going to put in the hard work, you're not diligent. I'm looking for reasons to not put you forth, because I don't want to have to replace you when you decide you don't want to be there anymore for whatever reason, because you had a bad call, or because someone looked at you sideways. So just kind of getting in the recruiter's head a little bit to figure out exactly what is they're looking for. And if you don't know, just ask. Like, ask the recruiter, like, "Hey, this particular role, like, what can I do to help stand out with this particular thing?" Like, half the time, just asking the question, which a lot of times people don't want to do. So
So I guess you answered my question already. I was going to ask, what would you say are some of the best first impressions someone's made on you? Like, what did they say? What did they do? Maybe it was just them reaching out and saying, "Hey, I saw you have a role in this specific niche. How could I be of help?" I think that would be a good one for me, or something like that. But if you have any examples of something specific where you're like, "Yeah, this guy's a solid candidate," what did that look like? And hopefully this doesn't get you spammed with copy and paste messages.
um well, I and
Mhm.
you can sort of see some of the intention behind some of these messages when they're sending it. Or the I will tell you that what I get very little of that I like are personalized, either voice notes, which you can do on pretty much any platform these days, or videos. That's a great way to nail that first impression. It doesn't even have to be anything long. It could be 5 seconds. "Hey, Ty, it's Zach. I saw your post with XYZ offer. Think I'd be great. I've," and then if you're gonna give me any information, whether it's in text or if it's in a voice note or video, short and sweet. I've told people that what they've sent me is too long. Like, they'll send me this long uh rundown of their whole, like, everything about their life. And I'm like, I don't need that. Don't send me that. I don't care. And I don't want to read it. Like, you're wasting my time. So, and I know that sounds bad, but like, somebody who's constantly getting applications, and everybody thinks that they're the only person in the pipeline. And so recognizing that high level, short and sweet, top shelf details are all I want to know. And I have my intro video, uh, what do you call it? I'm drawing a blank on the word. Intro video, recommendations for what to
Yeah, like
say.
framework.
The
Yeah.
framework, thank you. Set up with four things, and it's how long you've been in sales, what have you sold, uh, and I'm drawing a blank on my own video. How long have you been in sales? What have you sold? How much have you sold? And what does the business owner get when you hire me? And that right there is a really good framework that covers almost every basis that anybody who's ever going to watch your video cares about. And you can do all that in 2 sentences. At least the first three you can do in 1 sentence. So whatever you say to a recruiter, that's not as important. It's more about the intention behind it. But it's super short, and it's getting straight to the point. It's like, give me give me the reason that I should continue this conversation with you. Don't drag me on. Don't ask me how my day is going. I'm trying to hire and fill a role. Company's breathing down my neck. Like, "Hey, you got somebody for me? If you're the guy for the job, then let me know that I should pay attention to you rather than the other 99 people that are in my inbox." So, um, That's what I'd say to that.
I have a 1 minute video, kind of intro video framework, and it's pretty much almost exactly what you said there. And one thing I've really stressed to people, and I'm like, I've worked with recruiters in the past, just passing them off, coaching them in sales, and passing them off to the recruiter. And I've watched these guys watch the first 10 seconds and click off. So I'm like, you
Yep.
got to nail that first 10
Mhm.
seconds. And even just hiring for some sales teams that I've managed, first 10 seconds, I've made my decision. So I always tell them you got to get to that track record, that why should they care, as soon as possible in those 10 to 15 seconds. So it's good to hear
100%.
that that's kind of what you look at as well with there.
Yep.
That's awesome. What would you say are like some of the struggles you face as a recruiter in this industry?
Well, you'd be so from the candidates, how many people that I have to follow up with, uh, whether it's during the interview process or after they land the role. Like, I don't even find out from them they've landed the role. Like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. Really? So again, it's just showing some care and concern for the effort that somebody else put forth, and that goes a long way. And you know, again, it just always comes back to the small stuff. Just thinking about other people before you think about yourself. And if you're in a position where you are having a very hard time doing that, then you need to figure out how to get out of that position to where not playing, um, where you're not behind the eight ball, whether it's financially or you're just overly stressed, like, and you're not able to give to other people. That you need to figure out how to get out of that, because that's a problem. And that goes beyond just, oh, I forgot. Um, but most people don't follow up with me. I have to follow up with them. I even have automations in place to make sure that I'm up to date on where things are at. But so you can't over communicate with, at least with me. You're never going to hear me be like, "Oh, why'd you give me that update?" I'm like, "Okay, great. I'm up to date with where you're at. I know what the conversations you have with the business owner, because I don't always hear it from them either. Especially if they're interviewing, like if it's an agency and they're interviewing a bunch of people. Like, I don't get a play by play for every single candidate, but letting me know, like, hey, I had the call. Here's the next steps, um, and here's when we're going to talk again. Or hey, it didn't work out. Did you get any feedback on your end? Here's what I learned. Whatever it is, that stuff's really helpful. Um, so again, just simple
Mm,
communicating.
more likely, or I guess want to, go above and beyond for that person or refer them to other places if it doesn't work out because they build that relationship with you or they take the time to be communicative with you. So yeah, I guess I have, based on what you're saying, to build good relationships just with recruiters in general, which is a good idea for any closer because you never know when you're going to need another opportunity. But to obviously make a great first impression, showing that you care, personalizing stuff as much as you can, pretty much do the boring work that people aren't willing to do there. Keeping them in the loop, make sure to over communicate everything because obviously that's just making your job easier. What else would you say is a good way to build some solid relationships with recruiters in the space to keep your options open,
Referrals. If you
referring
got,
people over?
yep, yep. That sends a big signal, especially if it's business owners. Like if you're working with a company, I have a couple reps that have sent me referrals, even a couple that I've paid out for, in some cases. So happy to make it a win-win if there's that. But that's just another way to stick out in somebody's mind. And again, it's just realizing that the market is so saturated with people looking for jobs, and the supply side is not there to meet the demand for as many people as are looking for good solid roles. Less than 10% of my pipeline ends up landing a role. That's how few people actually who come in end up getting selected. So it's cutthroat. Like, it is not uh, not easy. So again, I'm doing it, but I'm doing it because I know the business owners are going to do it, looking for any little tiny thing that we can do to disqualify you because there's somebody right behind you. So it's really just getting super clear, dotting all your I's, crossing all your T's, and then just putting in some practice at the end of the day. Like, practice your intro videos, for example. Like, I can tell who's practiced and I can tell who's not. Just by even, like you said, the first 5-10 seconds. And when I've done them in the past, I'll sit there, record. I don't like that. Record. I don't like that. Record 20, 30, 40 times. I like that. It's organic and I wasn't reading a script, and which I can tell when you're doing that too. Um, And again, it's just taking a little bit extra time to have that edge. That's really all you need in this space is just have the edge uh, to beat out 90% of the other people that are just being lazy. They're just being lazy. And again, I think some of that is expectations that a lot of the gurus have put out there that it's way easier than it is, which is hogwash because it's not. Anything new, no matter who you are, is difficult, and there absolutely is a learning curve. Now, can you bend that learning curve in your favor? Absolutely. Um, but it's not going to come from just from coming across needy. Like that's the one thing. Like I tell people, if I find out that you're like desperate for money, you ain't getting placed. I'm 100% disqualifying you. So if you are on your last dime, your light's about to get shut off, don't tell me. Don't tell me
And why
because
is that? Why wouldn't you place people like that?
you're a flight. They're a flight risk. If they need money yesterday, you're looking at 30, 45, 60 days before that first paycheck hits your bank account. If we start the interview process now, by the time everything is said and done. And personally, it just doesn't make business sense for me to put somebody who's desperate in a role. Now, you can kind of look at that two ways and be like, well, desperate people, they're going to hustle, they're going to grind. Yeah, maybe, but some desperate people also are not in a good headspace to sell because they're they got commission breath because they need the money and prospects whether or not they realize that they can pick up on that. So it's being in a good headspace to be able to close a deal, which is again what's going to allow you to stick into the role longer term, which again keeps me from having to replace you. So
So then in those cases, what should beginners that are trying to get into this space do? Because obviously there's not that many opportunities in comparison to how many people are looking for them, based on what you're saying here. And then on top of that, some are getting into the space because they want to make more money and they are in that situation. So what do you think they should do to get
yeah,
like started? Should they go build up a 90-day runway first, or what are your thoughts?
I think there's a nuance that's going to play into this. So anything I say, I'm painting with a broad brush. It's not going to apply to everybody. What when I quit my job, I had a second rental home that we sold, and I had about 6 8 months worth of living. So, but you burn through that a lot quicker than you know. It never lasts as long as you think it's going to last. So I don't know if I necessarily recommend that. But I was in a spot that I could do it. It's just me and the wife at that point, and we were all in on doing it. Um, and we ended up living in our living room and renting out our two bedrooms in our Airbnb for an Airbnb to cover living expenses. So we kind of went as far as we could to keep me from having to go back to my job. So if you've got the ability to sort of get scrappy with it, by all means, just know it's going to take you way longer than you think it's going to take. So if you think it's going to take you 6 months, plan on 2 years. And yeah, you might get lucky, or you might have, God may will it to be a certain way, but we don't want to put the Lord to the test, and we don't want to just assume that things are going to work out just because it worked out for somebody else. Plan, hope for the best, plan for the worst. Um, I actually looked at my numbers today, this morning. I posted about it. 91-ish% of people that have come into my pipeline all have some background in sales, whether it's in high ticket or outside high ticket. So very few percentage of people actually, that at least they come to my pipeline anyway. So it is anecdotal in some sense, but maybe a good gauge on the rest of the market. Only about 10% are brand new. But anytime somebody asks me, because I do get people that are brand new come and ask me, what do I do? And they're looking at this. If you're new, you can't bring sales experience to the table, which these guys all want, like we talked about earlier. They want sales experience, looking for those hard skills. Have you closed deals, yes or no? So this is where some of the education is going to come into play. And rather than looking at the result based hard skills, you can bring not only soft skills that you've identified and can communicate clearly, but you can bring activity based hard skills. So when it comes to sales, if you're brand spanking new, you need to buckle up, because what you need to do is either go knock on doors for a summer, or you need to cold call for 90 days, or cold DM for 90 days, one of those three, preferably door to door or cold calling. 90 days. Just do that. It's going to suck. You're going to hate it. You're going to wish it was over the day it started. But there is uh, people who do that are gods among men in this space, because so few people are actually willing to do it. And when you're brand spanking new, you don't have any hard skills to necessarily offer to the sales world. And you may have some transferable skills that obviously come over, but as far as like actual hard sales skills, being able to pick up the phone and make a call to someone that you don't know and they don't know you, or knock on somebody's door and risk them slamming in your face is huge. Because what you're signaling is that I can handle rejection. I will not get, I can get kicked in the teeth repeatedly and nothing's going to stop me. I'm going to continue going. And that's what you can bring to a company. So it's very easy, generally speaking, to land a gig as a cold caller because nobody wants to do it. Okay, you can find a good company who's got a good process in place, but it's just cold calling. It's not random. They actually have a system that has predictable results. Hey, you make $100, you're going to get 5 people to pick up, and you're going to get 2 booked calls, and one's going to close. Maybe you can make some money along the way, but don't plan on it. But again, we're not looking at results here. We're looking at activity. So you can add that activity. This is the cool thing about sales in this space is everything that you do goes with you you take it with you and you add it to your resume. So after 90 days, you come back and you're like, hey, I've been cold calling my face off $400 a day, 7 days a week. I'm ready for my next thing. And almost anyone who's ever done any of those 3 things is moved into a different tier, and at least in my pipeline. Like I will do what I can to help you find a role. And I know that those things speak volumes to these business owners. It's one of the few things that I know that they are looking for. And that is how you get to the next level. And again, painting with a broad brush, but do the stuff the entry level things that nobody wants to do, so that way you can show the next company you go to work for, I'm willing to grind, and I'm willing to put in the effort. I'm willing to be diligent and um, do things that do not necessarily generate a result, at least a good result. And no one's going to ask you if anybody ever experiences this. You can come tell me because you'd be the first. No company's ever going to ask you, okay, well, with your cold calling, how many deals closed? No one's ever going to ask you. They're like, oh, you dialed $400 a day, dude. That's awesome. You obviously have a good work ethic. Let's work together. Nobody cares that the $400 didn't elicit any closed deals because it's very hard to do. So there's like this sympathy for the results with those types of things. But the point is you did it, and that's why you can pay attention to activity based um, uh, accolades rather than have closed all this revenue. So that's what I'd say to somebody who's new.
Yeah, I think that speaks volumes because just having that cold call experience on the resume is probably huge. Because I know even when I've looked for reps to bring onto an offer, as soon as I saw cold calling, it immediately spoke to their character, their determination,
100%.
their ability to just do the hard things. So yeah, for a beginner, I think if they do that for like 90 days or more, that would 100% help for sure. You mentioned earlier something about high churn in the industry. Can we speak to that a little bit? Like, why do you think there's such high churn for sales reps?
um,
I know there's a myriad of reasons,
yeah,
but
there is. Um, I'm gonna, with a contractor, so sales rep, and a business, I put 80 to 90% of the responsibility on the business because it's their business. Some people don't necessarily see it the same way, but I put the burden of success on the company, not necessarily on the rep. Because if someone comes in, like you hired somebody to do work for you and they don't perform, like, okay, sure, we can say they didn't perform, but it's your responsibility, Mr. Business Owner, because you decided to bring them in, you manage them, you gave them the tools or lack of tools in order to succeed. So generally speaking, I am going to tend to lean towards making um, asking businesses to take ownership of the turnover. And it goes back to a little bit of what I was saying before. These guys are wearing a lot of hats and don't often have margins to support full-time copywriters, uh, advertising agencies, marketing companies, much less pay a sales guy. So I think when margins get tight, or because margins are often tight when you're in a startup, and you're often leveraged. Like I looked a stat the other day. 86% of companies in the U.S. make less than $100,000 a year. A year. So only 14% are making over 10K a month. So um, the fact that money's flying everywhere and everybody's making all of it, that's not true. This is a winner takes most environment. So ultimately, I think the business needs to slow down. I see people trying to hire way too quick without really sitting down and bulletproofing their process. And that's hard because you're wearing so many hats. But everybody's obsessed with scaling. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen a company scale too hard and break things. They think, oh, I'm spending $100 a day on Facebook ads and I'm generating 10 leads. So if I jack that up to 1,000, then I'll generate 100 leads. No, not necessarily. It's not always how it works. Facebook algorithm is very, very temperamental, and there's a learning element to it. It's not just press a couple buttons and it starts working. So ultimately, I think that the high turnover comes down to that, the lack of overall business acumen on the business owner side of just not knowing how to scale a company properly. Um, you've also got a lot of elitism, and you've got a lot of business owners that have something stuck way up where the sun don't shine. It's almost like it's a rite of passage to be a butthole as a business owner, like that you can do no wrong. So I see a lot of blaming sales reps for lack of performance when their marketing is garbage. And I can't tell you again how many times I've heard from a sales rep. The number one problem that sales reps will tell me they have with companies is um, bad leads or no leads. Bad leads being the number one. And so many of these businesses will just drive traffic without really knowing what they're looking at or how to dial it in properly, and expecting the sales rep to close a deal. And then when they don't close a deal, they're like, well, you suck. And then all the sales training is born about how to objection handle. And that's meeting that's trying to solve a problem that we should never be trying to solve to begin with. We're solving a problem that bad marketing has caused. Bad marketing caused really cold leads that end up getting all of their nurturing and education from the sales rep on a 2-hour phone call. And then at the very end, when it's time to ask for the money, they don't want to do it. And so now we have all the sales training built around bullying the sales rep around, and all this verbal ninjutsu or verbal ninjing around how to get them to close at the end of the call, rather than making sure that that prospect is like ready to, like, in my opinion, prospects should be more or less ready to buy when they get on the phone with a sales rep. It's just figuring out, okay, what package and more or less how to buy, not if we should buy. They should already be semi warmed up. That's the point of a lead. Now, if you have a process where the sales rep needs to be generating that lead, like you're maybe doing cold outbound or something of that nature, well, that's okay. But there needs to be a process, and there needs to be a targeted process to who the heck we're talking to here. And you got to pay them way more than 10% to do that. You're talking 25, 30-ish% if they're taking that lead all the way to the end, because they're taking over marketing's job.
Mhm.
So ultimately, I think it's and also I'll say one more thing to the sales rep side. Expectations. I think we're starting to get away from this a little bit, which is great. But for a while, and I'm sure you remember this, it was be an inbound closer. Like your leads are hot and ready. They're ready to close.
Show up, take 6 calls, close 3 of them.
Exactly. And I came in 3.5 years ago, so maybe that was a little bit easier when the market was less saturated and a bit newer, maybe back in 2015 to 19 or whatever. But ultimately, if you look at the global financial environment, money is becoming scarce right now. And people are holding on to their dollars a little bit more than they were. They're also becoming a little bit more savvy with these ridiculous sales tactics, and they're just overall more with it. They're smarter. So, in my opinion, I'm seeing it getting hard. And I've talked to multiple business owners recently too that have said their show rates are coming down as well. So overall, it's just getting harder and harder in general to take people's money because they're holding on to it tighter. But so sales reps need to recognize that this is not easy. And when you come in, and you are probably going to have to do things that are outside of your scope. If you want to survive in this space, just remember that you are in a startup environment, and startup environment means that the lines of where the scope of your work start and where it ends is blurred. It's not a hard line. So you may end up if you're a closer, you may end up jumping into the pipeline when a week of leads, there's a dip in the leads. And I see guys that they don't want to do that. Like I've had people that are like, "Hey, I'm looking for work." I'm like, "Well, I've got this setter role with a base pay, great company, they're doing really well." And they're like, "Nah, I've been doing that for too long." It's like, okay, you'd rather go hungry and not have any work than take this role. And I'm also seeing a lot more sales. I'm getting asked for as a recruiter from businesses. Don't send me a fat cat, is what we call them. Don't send me somebody who's not willing to dig in the pipeline, engage with the lead when it comes in. If somebody only wants to take a call that's pre-booked on their calendar, ready to go, I don't want them. So the market's shifting. They don't want those type of people anymore because the 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 roles at large can't support that anymore because again, people are getting it's harder and harder to get people on the phone. Marketing's more expensive. It's more competitive. So it's just not worth it for to have somebody sit there and then complain when there's no calls on the calendar. And rather than being like, hey, there's no calls on my calendar. Let me go fix that. Let me dig into the pipeline. Let me pick up a second offer. Let me do this. Let me do that. Hey, Mr. Business Owner, what can I do to help? Instead of being like, well, you're not feeding me, bounce around and do what I want. So it's on both sides, but if I had to pick the responsibility, 51% at least, business owners need to understand a little bit deeper how to run and grow a business and manage a team. So
Yeah, I agree with that. A lot of there's a lot of overselling of offers, a lot of overselling of what's going on, but at the same
yeah.
time, and maybe this is partly, and well, I could say almost definitely partly due to a lot of the new like closing programs that are out, where that's the dream that's being sold is be a fat cat. It's an
Hmm.
awesome way to make 10, 20K a month is show up, calls come in inbound, and then you talk to them, they're pre-qualified, they're ready to buy, and away you go.
Yeah.
That's a lot of what gets sold. So yeah, no, that can definitely lead to a lot of churn. So I mean, yeah, I feel like you've given a lot of good advice to the brand new rep that wants to get into this. And from what it sounds like, obviously it's not easy. So I think the main thing someone would really need to do is establish that why. It's like, why are you doing this? Why do you want to get into this? Why, like, is this something you really want to do? Because it's kind of like a thing where you just got to commit, put in the work, commit a year, commit 2 years, and really build the skill, build a track record, and get on a great offer.
Yeah. And it also doesn't have to start or stop end at sales. You got plenty of other roles that the space needs to run. It's not like sales is the only one. So it's like you may find that you like something different. Sales was sort of my entry into this space in a sense, but here I am doing recruiting, which there's elements of sales to that, obviously, but it's not specifically a sales role. So kind of be open minded with like, hey, I want to be able to work remotely and do whatever I want, which this space absolutely provides. That's for sure. It just may look a little different than what the program that you bought said it was going to. But anybody who's bought anything or coming into the space, I mean, I did. I think it's a great way to get introduced, not because the information necessarily is something to die for. I think a lot of it's just regurgitated from another person, but it's the network, it's the people. That's the only reason I'm here. Is Moose Reed. Now I'm not afraid to say his name. He knows it. He's the reason I'm still here. So one guy is what led me to the next guy, and so on and so forth. So don't underestimate the network and people that you meet in communities and programs that you buy, because that's far more valuable than any of the information you're ever going to get from the course material or a group call or whatnot. It's the people. So
I agree. Totally, totally, totally agree, man. I can say 90% of the journey that I've been on has been because of the people I met in a program I bought in 2020.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So
hundred
yeah,
percent.
I hear you there. I hear you there. Well, that's all the questions I had for you, man. I want to thank you for joining me and thank you for being so thorough with your responses and answering it. I think watching this back, as a new rep, I would have like a pretty clear path or set of action items to go forward in, especially if I'm brand new to the space. I think that jumping on something cold so easy to get, and I have hundreds of people coming up to me saying, "Oh, it's cold. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I won't take it." Right? They're not even
Yeah,
willing to do it for 30 days, right?
right.
So, but as you've said, that's something that could really have them stand out in not only your pipeline but others and in interviews and stuff like that, because it speaks to more than just the results they really get. It speaks to their character. So I think that alone
Yeah, of
is a huge tidbit. So yeah, man, I want to thank you for joining me.
course. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Awesome. I will end it there. There you have it. That is the end of the interview that I did with recruiter Zach Brown. I really, really enjoyed spending some time speaking with him. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tag some of his socials, some of his projects, and things that he has that he's working on somewhere in this video wherever I post it. So if you're interested in seeing more from Zach, following him on his socials, getting involved in whatever it is he's working on at the moment, I'll, put some links down below for you to go and check him out, see what's going on. Guy is brilliant, knows his stuff in the sales recruiting game. So I highly suggest any of you that are in sales, looking to get in sales, looking to land a role, on a roll, definitely check him out and give him a follow. Hope you did enjoy this interview, and I'll see you guys in the next one.